Principal Matters Podcast, episode 497. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters Podcast episode. Jen, sometimes I forget we do Monday shows now and Wednesday shows now, but this week you're going to have the privilege, listeners, of meeting a good friend, Andrew Marotta from New York. You probably already know who he is because Andrew does some wonderful writing and speaking on principal leadership. But before we do that, Jen, we have a Q&A time.
Right. And our question of the week, everybody loves those. It is supported by Summer Pop's math workbooks. Principals, when students practice math over the summer, math scores go up. So what's your summer math plan this year? A great way to start is by ordering free summer workbook samples at summerpopsworkbooks.com. And that leads us to our question of the week.
So here's the question. I'm a new principal, preparing for my first time to let a teacher know we won't be renewing their contract for the next year. Any tips on how to do this well? And follow-up question, how do you control any damage to the culture of the school if it upsets other teachers?
Well, I have thoughts.
Please.
I think the thing to remember, the question, any tips on how to do this well? I think the thing to remember is to be clear and honest is a gift. You don't want to spin and spin and spin out of your own nervousness or your own anxiety or your own thoughts about what are the other teachers going to think. I've heard the phrase before, I think maybe from Brene Brown, clarity is kindness. You want to be honest and clear and don't procrastinate. I was with a group of principals last week and they were talking about that tendency to put it off because it's going to be so painful and so difficult. So don't fall into the trap of, I'll know what to say next week. You'll want to do this quickly. And then as far as what do I do about the culture in the building with other teachers? I feel very strongly about this. You build culture when you do the right thing, when you are honest, when you are clear. And so just so this conversation is held with the teacher can keep dignity and compassion and empathy, just so there's no way that you made anybody feel really awful. I think it builds trust because other people in the building will know that you have high expectations and that if the expectations aren't met, there's consequences and strong teachers like that.
Yeah, those are all such great tips, Jen. And I'll say a couple of other practical things. When I'm getting ready for a really hard conversation, I write down the thing I want to say. So I'm really clear. And so if things do get emotional, I can circle back to what I wrote down and just make sure this is the thing that was communicated. Second thing, and I've said this to listeners before, I practice what I'm going to say before a hard meeting.
Yeah.
So the first time it's coming out of my mouth isn't in the hard meeting. And usually when I hear myself say the words, I change what I'm going to say a little bit because I'm like, ooh, that didn't come across like I would want to hear it. And so don't be afraid to practice it. And then the last thing, this is hard to say because not every context is the same, but I've worked with principals whether it's their HR department or their negotiated agreements, don't allow them to say certain things when they're in these meetings too. So Jen, thank you for saying however you're required to communicate, do it with as much clarity and compassion as you can. So in some places you have a little more freedom to say more, and in other places you don't. And maybe I'll add this, you're not in control of how other people feel. And so don't feel like it's your responsibility to control other people's feelings, the person that you're letting go, or even the people within your building. I do agree, Jen, that it builds respect among a culture when people know you're making the hard decisions based on what you believe is best for kids. But if you're going to drive yourself crazy if you think you can control how people are going to feel, you do the right thing and then you move forward.
And one more quick tip. This piggybacks on your advice to rehearse. I have rehearsed before with our HR people. I've said, can I sit down with you and go through what I want to say? And they're always happy to do that because trust me, HR folks want it to go well too.
That's right.
And so find somebody you can rehearse and they'll catch you if you're going wayward at all. They'll help you with that.
Well, of course, you can always check out our resources at our websites. Jen, how can they find you in your wonderful newsletter?
Yep, they can find me at jenschwanke.com. And if they would like to subscribe to the newsletter, the link is right there. And just enter your email address and you'll hear from me every week.
And you can find today's resources at williamdparker.com. And I know you're going to love this conversation with my good friend, Andrew Marotta. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. IXL is research proven to benefit all student populations, including English language learners and special education classrooms. IXL is an all-inclusive online learning and teaching solution for K-12 that accelerates achievement, saves teachers time, and more. This one platform helps you accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically differentiates learning to help them master concepts at their own pace. Teachers get real-time insights into how students are performing so they can provide timely support. What I love about IXL are the personalized SAT and ACT study plans. Students just need to enter the most recent test score, and IXL automatically generates a custom list of skills they should work on to improve their scores. Discover what IXL can do for your school. Visit IXL.com/PM today.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, I'm going to be talking with my friend Andrew Marotta about magic, acronyms, and all kinds of other leadership stuff. Andrew Marotta is the Director of Communications and Academic Services for Port Jervis Schools in New York. And after spending more than 20 years as a principal and assistant principal, he stepped into this role to champion his district in creative ways while expanding his work as an author, speaker, and podcaster. He's the husband and father of a wonderful family, an adjunct professor of school leadership, and the founder of Surviving and Thriving, a master storyteller. He loves to energize others with authentic stories, memorable visuals, engaging, thought-provoking activities, all rooted in his commitment to positively impacting every person that he meets. He also officiated Division I men's college basketball for nearly 20 years, balancing high-pressure moments on and off the court, lessons that he brings to life for other leaders, and is the author of 7 leadership books, including The Magic Acronyms, Formulas and Impactful Stories of Leadership, a tribute to Dr. Rob Gilbert of the Success Hotline. And in this book, he explores leadership through hope, action, and timeless success principles. And he's a friend. Andrew Marotta, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they'd be surprised to know about you?
My man, Will Parker, good to see you. You talk about authenticity, you talk about kindness, you talk about one who walks the walk and talks the talk. That's you. I'm proud to be on with you. We connected in New York. You came up, beautiful Saratoga there. And where were we?
Where were we? We were just north of Saratoga, Lake George.
Lake George, it was awesome. And your latest book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? Fantastic read. Great practical things there, and a lot of leadership, elevating leaders. So I'm thrilled to be with you. Yeah.
And I'll just tell listeners, Andrew and I have known each other for years as content creators, as fellow principals. You came to Oklahoma after I left the Principals Association and spoke at one of the state conferences here, and I heard great things about you, Andrew. Also, you and I have been in the same rooms at conferences together, and you've written so many books, I can't keep up with it. So that's why I wanted to just bring the latest one to this conversation. But before we do that, I think something that's made you so unique in your leadership is all the years that you spent as both a principal and a college basketball official. So before we even jump into your book, I want you to bring some of those lessons. What are some of the lessons and high pressure moments that you have experienced in both fields that have helped you when you work with students, teachers, and community members?
Yeah, I love it. Those that made up my life. And sometimes I look back, I don't know how I did both, right? Survived and thrived. Number one is you got to show up, right? You don't feel well at school. You got to get in the hallway when the bell rings. You don't feel well. You still got to go do the game, right? We have to set aside sometimes how we feel. My dog's sick. This happened. Like people care. People are empathetic, but in the end, you got to do the job. Right? Those people in the crowd when I was refereeing, they're booing. They don't care that I got a flat tire or my big toe hurts. They don't care. You got to show up and do the job. And you gotta show up, right? You gotta be in the arena. Number two, you gotta be a great listener. Those coaches, right? Those teachers, those kids, they all got that air bubble above their head, Will, and they all have something. And what is it, right? You and I have done some reflective exercises together. You're a great listener. I've learned you really got to listen. And sometimes you ain't even got to do anything. You're just there. You're listening. You're being an active listener. And I think that's really important. And the other thing, just be who you are. Be yourself, right? You make a mistake, admit it. Hey, coach, I missed that. Teacher A, man, I really screwed that up. I'll do better next time, I promise. And then you got to make sure you go back and do better, right? Don't say that and continue to make the same mistakes. You tell a coach, hey, I apologize, I missed it. You got one of those, maybe two a game. So focus. Dial down what happened and make a quick correction and then get the next one right. And I think that's leadership. I think that's life. You and I have shared some stories of when we screwed up with our wives and say, hey, man, we got to make this right. I think that's honest. That's a real person, right? That's surviving and thriving. So those are some things that I learned along the way. And they helped each other, right?
Well,
they helped each other. When I made that mistake in the basketball court the night before, at school, I was like, oh, I better do a better job listening today, that kind of stuff.
Oh, those are so great, Andrew. You know me, I'm a summarizer and I love to just reflect. So I'm going to pause for a second and say a couple of things because you just said three powerful reminders. Show up, be a great listener, be authentic and honest. I just saw a reel yesterday by Daniel Pink, who's done a ton of research around leadership and marketing and branding. And he just does a lot of great work, but he was showing how people that make consistent actions over time always outperform other people who just do dramatic one-time show ups. And so that was the first thing that popped to mind. The second thing that popped to mind when you said, what is that thought bubble that's hovering over other people's minds, is the power of just being present. And then the third thing you said about authenticity and just admitting when you make a mistake. What I love about all three of those, and especially this one, is that we know from the quality of the work that we've done how important that is on the way we interact with other people that behave that way towards us. But then there's also just a ton of research that confirms everything you just said, Andrew. So this is what I love so much about the practice, is the practice confirms what we know is true. But sometimes it's just great to hear it again and to go, you know what? If you haven't heard it in a while, this is a great place to start. Anything you want to add to that before I move forward?
I like the concept of it's a little bit, a lot of the time. That's in the new book here. You go to the gym on Saturday for 3 hours, great. You're going to be sore on Monday. But if you go to the gym 30 minutes every day, you're going to be in good shape. You eat well all the time. You have one salad on Thursday night and pizza every other night like I want to do. You aren't going to be so healthy. So you got to do a little bit a lot of the time. And I think that helps keep us balanced and focused.
Okay, so let's talk about your new book because it's a tribute to Dr. Rob Gilbert. When you and I were talking the last time we were off the air together, hanging out, you told me about Dr. Gilbert, and I was not aware of his motivational work. And so you told me about the hotline number you can call. I've listened to some of his quips, and you're right, he's on fire. So, but tell us, for listeners who didn't know like I do, about who he is, his success hotline, and what about his work motivated you to turn those ideas into a new book?
Yeah. Awesome, Will. And again, if you're watching, that number is 973-743-4690. Just like I'm telling you and your listeners, 973-743-4690. Someone told me that back in 2014, Andrew, you'd love the hotline. I started calling Will and I loved it. I got a notebook. I'm writing the stuff down. And you could leave him a message if you want. You don't have to. But I left him a message. We connected. He invited me to his class. I went. We had a great time and just took off from there. We hit it off. We became friends. He's a mentor. But just like I said, a lot of time, if I'm calling every day, I'm learning something. I got something. Now I'm using it in my faculty meeting. Now I'm using it in a conversation with a teacher. Now I'm using it with a coach on the court. And it just made me better. And I don't know, I just felt this calling like, hey, man, this guy's doing it. He doesn't charge anything. He's become a friend. He's been so generous to me. My mom just passed away recently, and who do I get a book in the mail from? Dr. Gilbert, right? Dealing with loss of a loved one. Boom. 2 days later, he sends it to me. He's fantastic. And I just felt a need to say, hey, man, I got to capture this somehow. So I asked for his blessing. I said, Doc, can I do this? I'd like to. This is my idea. And so I weaved my own experiences, my own stories of things that happened to me. But then how do those leadership principles, not only have they helped me, help other people? So it's a tribute to Dr. Gilbert, but I share a lot of personal stories and anecdotes in there, things that have happened that I've screwed up, and then how these things have helped me along the way.
Well, I'll just show how much I still need to learn, but I didn't know that sports psychology professors were a thing. And so when I saw what he does as a living and that he's been doing it for, 50, 60 years, I mean, this is a guy whose entire research is based around the psychology of what's involved in athletics and sports and competition. And so you really do get these bite-sized, just powerful reminders of how your mindset and your attitude change things. So take us there, Andrew. What are some of your own stories or principles that you've pulled from that work that you like to take from that work from Dr. Gilbert and bring to other leaders?
A lot of persistence, Will, right? A lot of it is mental strength. One of his stories is Mr. D'Amato, right? Mr. D'Amato goes to the doctor every year on his birthday, and he's 100. And the doctor says to Mr. D'Amato, you look fantastic. You're in better shape than myself. And he says, well, I walk 5 miles every day. And the doctor said, wow, that's fantastic, but Mr. D'Amato, it's pouring out today. What do you do? And he says, I put a raincoat on. We make excuses of why we don't do things. And then we don't go do them, right? It's funny today. I was looking at my push-up bars, and I did my push-ups, but I was looking at them. I felt this calling. I'm writing a poem called Ode to the Push-Up Bar, just about how we fight ourselves, right? And if you want to do 150 push-ups a day, you could. We don't, but you could. So Mr. D'Amato puts a raincoat on, right? That's a story. Well, here's an acronym. C greater than F equals R. My good friend from Missouri, Joe Stickle, has that tattooed on his arm, Will. When your commitment is greater than your feelings, you're going to get the results that you want. Jove was 600 pounds. He's lost over 300 pounds, and he's in the 200 range now by leading a healthier lifestyle, by changing his habits, and his commitment to his health is that. So he's got that tattooed now, and he heard that through one of my talks from Dr. Gilbert. So that's one of those acronyms there. So it's the magical stories, formulas, and acronyms of leadership. And Dr. Gilbert was thrilled with it. I'm honored with it. And it's one of these. Well, if you're listening, you can't see, but I'm just going to flip, right? Here's the success cycle right here. I had that hanging on the wall in school. Savers. This is one I added. Silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. And that's from the Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod. That book changed my life. So I threw it in there as part of mixing up my stuff with Dr. Gilbert.
Well, this will lead into the next question I wanted to ask you, Andrew, because what I love about those stories and those principles and those applications is we see that modeled in the lives of others. And now you transitioned into a role as a director after years of serving as a principal. And so I'm just curious what lessons from your experience as a leader, as a principal, but also the ones you're still learning that help you when you're supporting schools and school leaders, because now you are in that role of supporting and coaching and encouraging people that are doing the work you did do. And so what are some ways that you're trying to pass those lessons along?
Yeah, great question, Will. I'm honored to be on with you here. I know your podcast is a big hit, but I flipped way to the end of the book. Page 249 is the conclusion. And the conclusion is entitled, It's About Others. As a young administrator, you're just trying to survive, right? You're just trying to get through the day and hopefully, not get fired and, oh my God, And then eventually you kind of come into the role and you're trying to make an impact. You're trying to make a difference. You're trying to move the dial. But it's about others. I've been in Port Jervis. Again, if you're watching, here's the shrine of Port Jervis. I'm proud to be here. I got my black and red on today. But it's about others, right? You wanna move the scores of your kids, your graduation rate. Well, when you pour into supporting those teachers and when you show care and kindness, right? Are you going to get compliance from people by screaming at them or making them, fear you? Or you gonna build? Hey, man, I want to do a great job for this person because I respect them and I admire them. Here's a funny story. Well, it's not in the book, but I'm just thinking about talking here. So I'm an Italian guy from New York. I'm passionate. I'm loud, but again, I mentioned authentic. So I'm outside at Arrival of students, and I, push the cafeteria. Hey, man, let the kids come outside with the food. Let them, no, Mr. Marotta, they're going to trash it. The kids are going to throw, I'm like, hey, let them get the food and come outside, Well, I'm out there one morning, and they go in, and it is a mess. It's a mess out front. So, and you never yell at everybody, right? You never do that. But I jumped right on the loudspeaker. I said, "This is Mr. Marotta." I said, I got to tell you, students, I'm very disappointed. I just came in and there was so much garbage, outside. I'm going out there right now with a bag. That is not to happen again. If this continues, I'm not going to allow the food out of the cafeteria anymore. I don't expect, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. Well, I'm out there with the bag and the little picker thing. And who comes out? Well, the kids are starting to pour out of the doors in the hallway. And they came out and they said, "Mr. Marotta, I'm sorry, you're right, boo, boo." And we never had that problem again. And the story reminds me, right? It's not about the yelling. It's about that the kids cared. They knew I cared. There was a commitment there. Again, that word commitment. So it's about others. 20-something years here in Port Jervis. And Will, you were a principal, right? The word success might be on evaluations, right? Your scores were successful. Your graduation rate was successful. But the word significant isn't on leaders' evaluation. But when we could be significant in the lives of the people we serve, when we go to wakes and funerals of community and family members, when we go to the Boy Scout Eagle service ceremonies and the second place ceremony, the kid missed it, right? And he's not the champion, but you showed up for the second place trophy ceremony because you care. Those are the things that people remember, and really what matters so much.
I'm so glad you said that, because when you take that story, Andrew, in isolation, it's easy to be able to say, well, I don't know, how would I have responded? Would I have addressed the whole kids or tried to find individual kids? But here's the truth, Andrew, is when you spoke to those students, if that had been in isolation away from the significance, the relationship, the meaningful moments, all those things that you built with them, you'd have been out there picking up trash by yourself. But because you expressed to them your disappointment, and then you actually went out and modeled the solution. You didn't demand it, you modeled it. You had already built a relationship enough with those students. And I'm not saying this is magic. Nobody listening knows. Everybody knows that you never can predict what's going to happen. But my take on that is that because you spent the time before that moment building those kinds of meaningful relationships and significant, I'm using your words, significant relationship, meaningful moments, being there for kids when they needed it, then they were there for you. And man, that's what it's all about. We have listeners who are both new to leadership and veterans. So I hear from people that are, I had a conversation just a few weeks ago, and if this young man's listening, thank you, but from a college junior who's looking at education as his major and is already thinking about becoming a principal someday. So he listens to the podcast. I have calls from listeners who are right on the cusp of retirement and they're getting ready to step into something new. But so I want to speak to both of those audiences, Andrew, because you and I are in a unique place where we're still in education, but we can look back and we can look forward. So let's talk first to that person stepping in, that new leader. What are some things you would tell that person to keep in mind for their first time stepping into a role of leadership?
Yeah. Every day is a new day. You get better. You take notes, right? I mentioned about telling the coach, hey, I made a mistake, or telling the teacher, hey, I made a mistake. You got to get better. Every day is a new day. There's going to be days where you don't feel like it. Well, I learned you could act differently than you feel, right? The bell rings. If you're moping around and you go in the hallway, well, everyone else is going to be moping around because the principal's moping around, right? What do they say? If the principal sneezes, everyone catches a cold. Well, it's true. You got to act the part. You got to look the part. You got to go to things when you don't feel like it. When you're wrong, you got to say, "Hey, I'm wrong." You got to listen. You got to be, quick moving too, right? You don't want to be in a hurry. But the day goes fast, and you got to learn to kind of take notes, remember things. I got a lot of reminders, and here I've been doing this job a long time. Here's my notepad. Well, I got my reminders, my things. I'm writing it down. I have backups to make sure I do it. I use Siri a lot and Google Calendar. So that's what I would tell them. And the last thing is, again, focus on relationships. There's that famous book, The Last Lecture, and a famous college professor packed the place. It was his last lecture, and he ends with, students, and I'll leave you with this: build trust and develop relationships. Build trust and develop relationships, and we, as educators, we get to do that each and every day. For those veterans, Will, it's all about, again, making that significant impact on your community. I'm proud in Port Jervis, where we've raised our graduation rate way back when I got here in 2005. It was in the 60s. And a lot of hardworking people, a lot of great teachers and people came together. And we're at 90 now, and I'm really proud of that, right? And that's success, right? That's a successful thing. But again, I mentioned my mom passed away, and I did a little tribute on Facebook to my mom. And half the comments, Will, were from parents in my district and students, former students of mine. And even my assistant principal said, Andrew, look, you might not have been the best principal, but look at the impact you made on the kids, because the kids were commenting about me as their school leader, knowing that I got my personality and I got who I was from my mom, and they said your mom would have been proud of you for the work you did. I was your student, and that meant the world to me.
Oh, I love that so much. I was you're reminding me, you and I are both storytellers, but at the time of this recording, this will have been back in January when this happened. So I was able to go down to Pensacola to the naval station there, where my nephew was finishing training as a flight officer. So they were doing the ceremony where they pinned the wings on. And there was an admiral who was addressing the crowd of people. He was the guest speaker. And he was giving these new flight officers his speech. And I actually took mental notes, Andrew. And as you were speaking, I could hear you echoing the same things. He said 3 things that he wanted them to know: is know your mission, learn to be decisive, and build relationships. And I was sitting there thinking, here's a guy that's training people to go to war. And then here's my friends that are doing this work every single day to prepare kids to learn and go into life. And there's a lot of those same principles, which brings it full circle, Andrew. I mean, you've done this work as a principal, you've done it as an official in Division I basketball. You're doing it now as a director of communications. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a presenter. And so I just want you to, I'm going to ask you to make a shameless plug, because my listeners often have an opportunity to bring people in to work with their teams or to come to their conferences. And so help people understand what it's like when you get to step in a room and work with others and encourage them in their work.
Yeah, I love it. Well, number one is that whoever that junior is that listens to your show, if he emails me, Andrew Marotta, LLC at gmail.com, Andrew Marotta, LLC at gmail.com. If he emails me, I'm going to send him a couple of my books and we'll get him going. So whoever that person is, but dude, Will, I love it. I love presenting with groups, meeting groups. Again, I had a great time in Oklahoma. My talks are energizing. There's storytelling, humor, but there's a lot of practical strategies, right? There's a lot of practical things. Again, I like this one. I like props. Here's one of my newest props here, Will. It's a bird cage, right? And there's a lot of great leaders that want to learn. They want to try new habits. They want to maybe write a book, or they want to raise that graduation rate, right? And so there's no bird in this bird cage right here. But if I walk around with this bird cage long enough, you know what's going to happen, Will? Someone's going to give me a bird, all right? That's a strategy That's a strategy, right? When you're focusing on your goals and you're doing this, it's going to come to you. You're a good person. You're energized. You're passionate about it. So when you carry a bird cage around long enough, someone's going to give you a bird, and that bird might be, again, getting your doctorate, getting that job, raising the level of your school, elevating others, all of those type things. So, but yeah, outside my work here in Port, I love going to districts, meeting people, and again, I got to be around you multiple times at events, and there's a lot of great people out there that are trying to do good things. So I'm happy to be in with them and feel that I am making an impact on others.
I love those illustrations, and there's so many applications to that, Andrew, which is that when you do, and this is a sentiment that you've expressed earlier, which is we want to feel good every day. We want to feel like we're walking in the right motivation to do the work. But the truth is, it's hard work when you are working with students or teachers or schools. You're going to get slammed. There's going to be moments where you're questioning yourself, but then you just show up again. And when you hold out that object of this is where we're heading and this is what we're trying to build and where we're trying to go, people are going to stop looking at you and they're going to look at the thing you're holding out. And it's what a great illustration. As we wrap up, I want you to have the opportunity to just share any other parting words of advice, Andrew, that you have, things that you love to teach from your work or your books, and then tell listeners how they can connect with you. And you also do a live podcast. I want you to tell people how they can find out more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Everything's at andrewmarotta.com. My information is there. I gave my email, my podcast. I'd love people to sign up for my blog too. Well, I do a weekly blog called Education, Leadership, and Beyond. That comes out on Mondays. I have guest authors, guest writers do that. But what I would tell people, my parting words, is to enjoy the journey, Will. This job could eat you up. This job could kind of take over things. And sometimes when you're chasing that goal, when you're chasing that thing, whether it's being a principal or a superintendent, sometimes you lose sight of really what's most important, right? And for me, my family is most important. And I'm lucky that I live very close. I'm in the neighboring community of Port Jervis. Port Jervis is my second home, but I'm in the neighboring community, so I'm very close, right? I could go to my kids' games. I could go to their events, but I never wanted my kids to resent my job at Port Jervis, that dad's not at my stuff, and dad's always writing these books, or dad's always doing these evaluations. And I certainly didn't want to lose my wife. My wife is my high school sweetheart, and the stresses of the job, right? People bring it home. And I just think it's important for administrators and educators out there to focus on what's most important, and that's your family. Again, I don't mean to keep bringing up my mom, but it was top of mind. Around my mom's bed as she was leaving us was all her children, her 11 grandchildren, and it was a sad moment. But we all looked around like, wow, she was loved, and she was loved because she was always there for us. She always provided for us. She always, all these things. So I want to make sure that the number one job I have is my family as a husband and a father. Port Jervis is a close second, man. I love Port. I love being here. I love serving here. But my family always came first, and I never made excuses for that. When my kids were sick, I took them to the doctor. Sometimes I had to bring them with me to school, and they were sitting in my office, and people said, "Oh, he brought his kids to work." Well, it is what it is. But I never let them take a back seat in my life. And here's one more little bit of advice. I know we got to go, right? I want to be the best for Port Jervis, right? I go present to a school in Oklahoma, Will, or a conference in Oklahoma. I want to be the best for them. Well, your family wants the best of you, not the rest of you. And if you give your best everywhere else, well, then you might not have anything left for them. So make sure the order is correct with your partner, your children, and your family first, and then those other things, your job and your passions, better be second, because then things get out of whack and it gets out of order. So,
Man, I love that so much. I'll share this with you, Andrew, because I know we love to share reflections with each other, but there's this 4-statement assessment I like to do, especially when I'm coaching leaders, where I'll just say, okay, just give yourself a quick rating on 1 to 5 on these practices. 1, I am visible and present every single day with every student, every teacher. And that brings you back to, am I showing up? 2, am I meditating, learning, and reading helpful books or lessons? So am I staying a learner, staying hungry? And you do that all the time. 3, am I making healthy choices in my sleep, nutrition, exercise? Because if you don't take care of your bodies, you're going to burn out. And 4, am I giving my loved ones the time and attention that they deserve? And all 4 of those statements kind of bring it full circle, because it's not just the work. It's also those important relationships in lives. And man, that vision of your mother being surrounded by the people that love her, it's just so dear. I think all of us dream of, what do we want people to say about us when we're at the end of our lives? And none of them are going to say, oh, I'm so glad he kept up with his emails. I'm so glad he took out the trash every week. They're not going to say that, Andrew. They're going to be.
My wife might say about the trash. She said she might throw that one in.
She might. Well,
she might.
Well, Principal Matters listeners, I want you to reach out to go to andrewmarotta.com, Marotta. Andrew
a lot of Marotta, Will. A lot of Marotta.
And check out Andrew's blog, check out his books, check out his Instagram page, check out his Survive to Thrive community, invite him to the professional development that you've got coming up this year, and then send him an email. And if we have that young man listening who's an aspiring leader, or maybe you're an aspiring leader and you're like, I want that free book, reach out to Andrew. I guarantee he's going to take care of you. But Andrew, thank you so much, friend, for all you do. Thanks for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you soon. You can find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.